Who is the one person an avoidant fears losing the most? It's not the one who argues, demands, or constantly seeks attention. It's the quiet constant, the person who never forced closeness, yet became the invisible anchor of their emotional world. To the avoidant, this presence felt like safety without pressure, connection without control. They never fully realized how much stability this one person brought until the day they disappeared. When that happens, the avoidant's world doesn't collapse all at once. It changes in small, almost invisible ways, a subtle shift in their inner balance, a quiet disruption they can't name. Outwardly, they keep smiling, working, and moving through life. But inside, something fundamental begins to shift, setting off a chain of changes they can't stop. Psychologists see these changes as a series of dynamic progressions, interconnected internal shifts that unfold silently, each one reshaping how the avoidant thinks, feels, and reacts. These progressions are not dramatic explosions, they're slow burns. And once they begin, the avoidant can never truly return to who they were before. In this video, we're going to explore exactly what happens inside an avoidant when this person disappears, the subtle beginnings, the hidden emotions, and the deep transformations that follow. And as you listen, think about whether you've ever been that person for someone, then share your thoughts in the comments. Anchor displacement hypothesis. A philosopher once said that some people in our lives are invisible in their presence, but their absence feels like an earthquake. In the life of an avoidant, there is almost always such a person. They don't make noise, they don't proclaim their importance, yet their quiet presence keeps the avoidant's internal map in balance. They guide without controlling, give direction without taking over. For the avoidant, who fears interference of any kind, this feels like an extraordinary form of safety. This person is there without conditions or demands, their presence carries no pretense, no competition. For the avoidant, who often feels burdened in relationships, this is a priceless gift, companionship without captivity. They don't pry unnecessarily, but with just a glance, a pause, or the slightest change in tone, they can reflect back to the avoidant a truth they themselves are reluctant to acknowledge. This reflection never turns into accusation or criticism, which is why the avoidant doesn't run from it. When life's storms arrive, this person doesn't create chaos or take control of the situation. They simply remain whole, calm, and steady exactly when everyone else seems to be trembling. Their presence isn't a hero's rescue, but a quiet anchor, the kind of hand that holds firmly without pulling. With them, the avoidant sometimes lowers their walls. They may never openly admit it, but they know their secrets are safe here. Words they may not have spoken to anyone in years somehow slip out in front of this person. And because they never judge, never turn advice into a weapon, that trust deepens over time. Their demeanor is consistent, never so warm that the avoidant feels smothered, never so cold that the relationship dies. This steady balance builds a trust the avoidant rarely acknowledges but always feels. They never weaponize emotions or turn influence into a threat. Their impact is quiet yet profound, shaping the avoidant's mood, thoughts, and behavior without them even realizing where the shift began. Most importantly, they understand distance. They know when to step back without disappearing, and when to move closer without taking over space. For the avoidant, this kind of balance is almost impossible to find, which is exactly why this person becomes irreplaceable. When such a person disappears, the avoidant doesn't just lose a friend or companion. They lose their inner compass, their silent mirror, and the hidden anchor that kept their balance intact. And because such people are so rare, their absence creates a void no ordinary connection can fill. This is why, even after time passes, the avoidant's mind keeps circling back to that one person, because some presences, once gone, echo far louder than they ever did while they were here. Relational vacuum state, a 20th century philosopher once wrote, "It is not the noise of absence that unsettles us, but the shape it leaves behind." In the life of an avoidant, that shape often belongs to one irreplaceable person, a presence so naturally embedded in their days that its disappearance doesn't crash in like thunder. It pulls the air out slowly, leaving a quiet but expanding void. This person isn't defined by constant activity or grand gestures. They are defined by the specific way they inhabit space, subtle enough not to overwhelm, yet present enough to anchor. They create an unspoken safety net, not by holding tightly, but by existing steadily. The avoidant, accustomed to emotional scarcity or control in relationships, finds in them a rare balance, connection without pressure, closeness without confinement. They understand timing like a skilled musician, knowing when to pause, when to lean in, when to let silence speak. They absorb confessions without turning them into ammunition. They offer observations without trying to rewrite the avoidant's reality. Around them, the avoidant's guarded edges soften, not into dependence, but into a level of ease they rarely experience. When life throws chaos into the mix, loss, uncertainty, or difficult choices, this person doesn't react with volatility. They remain a constant point of orientation. They don't try to fix the avoidant, nor do they demand emotional performances. Instead, their mere presence acts as a regulating force, holding the emotional climate steady even when the world feels unpredictable. But the relational vacuum state begins when this singular connection vanishes. It doesn't matter if the departure is abrupt or gradual, the effect is the same. The absence starts rearranging the avoidant's internal architecture. Without realizing it, they begin to notice the missing calibrations. Conversations that once felt natural now feel hollow, silences that were once comfortable become heavy, and small moments of grounding are replaced by an underlying restlessness. The avoidant might initially tell themselves they're fine, after all, they've always valued self-reliance. But the human nervous system doesn't lie. Their interactions with others start to feel slightly off, either too much or not enough. Social connections lack that same unspoken understanding. Emotional exchanges feel either suffocating or barren. In a strange way, even solitude changes. What once felt like choice now feels like exposure. This is the essence of the relational vacuum state. The removal of a stabilizing presence creates not just loneliness, but an atmospheric shift in the avoidant's inner world. It's not simply that they miss a person, they miss the regulation that came with them, the subtle cues, the emotional pacing, the safety in unpredictability. And because these dynamics are so rare, the absence refuses to fade into the background. Over time, the avoidant may find themselves unconsciously seeking fragments of that lost balance in other relationships, but replicas fall short. The precision of that fit, the way it met their defenses without triggering them, becomes a benchmark they can't unknow. And so, the mind circles back, not out of habit, but because it's chasing equilibrium that now exists only in memory. Recognition shock response. A well-known psychologist once said, "We don't always lose what we can see with our eyes, often we lose what quietly stands behind the curtain of the heart." In the life of an avoidant, there is often such a person, someone who, without grand declarations, becomes part of their emotional equilibrium. This is a person the avoidant may never fully acknowledge, yet whose presence stands like a silent pillar within their mental framework. This person turns the relationship into a safe space rather than a responsibility. They don't flood the avoidant with questions, nor weigh them down with unsolicited advice. They listen without trapping, observe without controlling. For an avoidant who often experiences relationships as burdens or threats, this is a rare comfort, companionship without captivity. The recognition shock response begins the moment this person suddenly or quietly disappears from the avoidant's life. At first, the avoidant interprets it as a normal period of distance. After all, they are skilled at tolerating absence. But then, subtle gaps start appearing in daily life. A morning message that never fails to arrive is suddenly missing. A silent presence that used to warm conversations is replaced by a cold stillness. The shock isn't just about someone's absence, it's about the moment the avoidant realizes that this person is not coming back. The realization strikes like a bolt of electricity, sudden, not gradual, and the mind resists accepting it. The person they never gave full importance to now feels like an empty room that once held a light which illuminated everything. This shock ripples through multiple layers. Emotionally, a low-grade restlessness begins to build, one the avoidant can't quite name. Socially, they find themselves searching for traces of that person in small things, a certain turn of phrase, the tone of a laugh, the unique way they offered quiet reassurance. Psychologically, a contradiction emerges. They once wanted freedom from closeness, yet now they seek proximity to fill the void. The deepest impact of the recognition shock response is in how the avoidant rewrites the role of that person in their memories. They revisit past moments with fresh awareness. Every conversation, every shared silence, every subtle gesture now carries a new weight. What once seemed ordinary is recast as extraordinary. Over time, the initial shock evolves into a permanent undertone. Even as the avoidant tries to move forward, their mind repeatedly circles back to the exact moment they realized the person wouldn't return. That instant becomes etched into their emotional map, a marker they cannot erase, only live with. The recognition shock response isn't about longing for just any connection, it's about the disorienting discovery that they've lost the one connection that managed to coexist with their boundaries without threatening them. And because such people are so rare, the echo of their absence often grows louder with time, until it's impossible to tell whether the avoidant is remembering the person or the way they once felt in their presence. Emotional gravity loss model. A philosopher once remarked, "We don't drift away from the shore because the sea pushes us, we drift because the anchor quietly lifts." In the emotional world of an avoidant, there is often one person who serves as that invisible anchor, someone whose steady pull keeps them from floating too far into the cold distance of isolation. The avoidant may not consciously notice it, but their inner rhythm quietly orbits around this person's presence. This individual doesn't demand orbit, they create it naturally. They offer a grounding energy without imposing control, a sense of direction without turning into a guiding leash. They are neither overly sentimental nor distant to the point of disconnection. For the avoidant whose default state is self-containment, this kind of presence acts like an unseen gravity, holding them in place without force. The emotional gravity loss model describes what happens when that gravitational pull suddenly disappears. At first, the avoidant feels no obvious panic. They may even welcome the idea of space, convincing themselves that self-reliance has returned. But in the days or weeks that follow, something shifts subtly then steadily. Conversations feel lighter, but not in a freeing way. They feel hollow. Decisions feel unanchored, as if they are making them while standing on an unsteady raft. Without that grounding presence, the avoidant experiences a slow-motion drift. Tasks that once felt connected to a bigger picture begin to seem directionless. Interactions with others lack the quiet confidence that came from knowing someone, somewhere, understood them without needing explanations. The avoidant who prides themselves on independence now finds themselves wondering why everything feels slightly off balance, like walking in a room where the floor tilts just enough to be uncomfortable. The loss of this emotional gravity isn't always dramatic. It doesn't arrive like a storm, but more like air slowly leaking from a balloon. The avoidant may notice it in moments that seem unrelated, forgetting why they entered a room, losing track of conversations, or realizing they no longer feel the same motivation for the things that once mattered. In memories, this person begins to take on a new role, not as someone who was there but as the quiet force that kept the avoidant aligned without them realizing it. The avoidant recalls how they spoke differently in that person's presence, how their thoughts flowed more clearly, how even silence felt purposeful rather than empty. These recollections sharpen with time, making the absence feel heavier, not lighter. Over time, the avoidant may try to replace this gravity with new connections or distractions, yet like trying to swap the earth's pull with a candle's flicker, it never feels the same. The drift continues, and with it comes the unshakable awareness that something vital, something that kept their inner world from spinning into chaos, is gone. And because people who can provide this kind of grounding are so rare, the avoidant's thoughts keep looping back, not just to the person but to the unique sense of stability they brought. A stability that once lost makes every step feel just a little less certain. Hollow equilibrium framework. A philosopher once wrote, "Some buildings appear flawless from the outside, yet silent fractures run through their foundations." An avoidant's life can often mirror this idea. On the surface, they seem steady, keeping up with daily routines, engaging in conversations, showing no visible disruption. But within there is a quiet void slowly eroding their internal balance. This void doesn't stem from a generic sense of loss, it's born from the absence of a very specific person, someone who once served as a hidden center in the avoidant's emotional architecture. This person wasn't a loud savior or an intense figure, They were a subtle harmonizer, the one who kept extremes in check, softened unnecessary tensions, and made life feel quietly livable. Their presence acted like an invisible shield, guarding the avoidant from emotional turbulence without ever drawing attention to it. When that shield disappears, everything on the outside appears unchanged. The avoidant still goes to work, meets friends, completes chores, but inside, the structure has shifted. What once was genuine contentment becomes something hollow. They still laugh, talk, even make jokes, but there's a faint pull, a subtle weight hiding behind it all. The hollow equilibrium framework captures this state, where external stability remains intact, but the inner framework is gradually emptying. This emptiness doesn't shout, it expands quietly. The avoidant may not even name it, may try to dismiss it. Yet it begins to leak into small details, an unusual fatigue, a decline in focus, hesitation in making decisions. The absence of that person doesn't trigger a dramatic breakdown, rather it leaves the avoidant standing on what appears to be solid ground that is in truth ever so slightly tilted. Over time, that tilt deepens, and they slide downward without noticing when it began. Memory plays a decisive role here, the moments when everything felt right, the conversations that once seemed ordinary but now feel priceless, the silences that spoke volumes, these replay in the void. The more they try to push them away, the louder they echo. And because people like this are rare, the resulting emptiness becomes more than just a gap, it becomes a constant condition. It's not simply about missing someone, it's about missing the inner anchor that once stabilized everything without asking for anything in return. This is the essence of hollow equilibrium, the quiet breakdown where the outer structure remains convincing, but the inner balance has already shifted beyond repair. Over time, the avoidant isn't simply living without someone, they're living without the hidden gravitational center that once kept them upright. And though the outside world may never notice, the avoidant feels it in every subtle change, every small hesitation, every moment of silence that now feels too loud. In the end, what each of these progressions reveals is that the avoidance world doesn't unravel in grand visible collapses, it shifts in quiet, almost imperceptible ways. The loss of that one person, whether it's the anchor that held them steady, the rare presence that gave balance, or the subtle force that regulated their inner tides, sets off changes that no one else may notice, but that the avoidant feels in every corner of their inner life. It's not just about missing someone, it's about losing a way of being that only existed in that specific connection. The anchor displacement, the relational vacuum, the recognition shock, the emotional gravity loss, the hollow equilibrium, each is a different face of the same truth. Some people don't just occupy space in our lives, they shape the very structure of our inner world, and when they're gone, you can't simply replace them. You can find new people, new routines, even new joys, but the exact blend of safety, distance, and unspoken understanding they offered is something rare enough to mark you forever. The avoidant might not speak about it, might even pretend nothing has changed, but deep down, they know they'll never be quite the same. So if you've ever been that person for someone, or if someone has been that for you, recognize it. These connections are rare, fragile, and powerful, and once lost, their echoes can last a lifetime. Share your thoughts below, because sometimes, even the quietest stories deserve to be heard.